Hello everyone, today's lesson is writing. I will teach you the 5 steps that a writer goes through in order to write a personal narrative. By the end of this session, you should be able to identify, understand and use the 5 steps of the writing process of a non-fiction narration. As usual, we use the KWL chart or table in order to write what we already know about the topic, in this case, the 5 steps of writing. What do you know about writing? What is the process that a writer goes through? Secondly, what you'd like to learn, or if you have got questions to ask, write them down here. And this one until the end, and then you write what you've learned and what are those 5 steps. All right, what is the writing process first? The writing process, writing is a process actually, because your idea goes through a series of changes or stages before the product is finished, which means before you finish your piece of writing. The 5 steps in writing process are: number 1, pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. Study the diagram to show how moving through the writing process can work. Remember, you can go back to a stage in the process. It does not always have to occur in order. All right, let's take a look at this chart. So the first step is pre-writing. So what is pre-writing? What do you do? In the pre-writing, you will explore ideas, choose a purpose and an audience you want to target, gather details, and sequence ideas. Second step, you go to drafting. You should put your ideas down, develop a thesis, that is the main idea you want to discuss, and finally structure ideas in a sustained way. After you finish drafting, you move to revising. You reread your draft to see what works and what does not. Usually most of the students just basically what they do is this step in their writing. They just write and they submit their work, and this is wrong. You should always start with pre-writing, then drafting, and precisely when you do drafting, do the revising. It's very crucial. Anyway, after that, we use a rubric to evaluate our piece that we wrote. Then we analyze what we want to change or improve in our draft, and then we make those changes. And that leads us to editing. We check the accuracy of facts that I mentioned, and we correct errors, especially in spelling, grammar usage, and mechanics. And after you finish these 4 steps, you go to the last one. We publish. We produce our polished copy of writing, and we share our writing either with our classmates if you're in school, or outside school, or on a blog, or whatever means. So the first step, that is pre-writing. So this is the first one. We have to plan our piece that we want to write. How? This graphic organizer, will help me do that. How? Via identifying my focus, gathering details, and plan my piece. So this has got 2 columns. The first part of story. The part of story is mainly divided into 3 parts. The first one, the second one, and the last one, the end. All right. So here we have got the plot. The plot, we start with the beginning. What should we do? A few details about who I am. I write them down, a sentence, a topic of the story, I would like to focus on, and hint about why I am telling this story. Just a hint, and also to trigger the reader. So after that, I move to the body, the middle, actually revealing the problem, conflict, and the reasons that it happens. So here I write the challenge, the conflict, the problem I have. Remember the 5 elements of a plot that we studied? They are exactly what we are using here. So we studied them so that we can analyze stories, also to write ones. After that, we have to write specific details, quotations about how the problem got worse, that is reaching the climax, and why it needed to be solved. All right. When you finish the middle, then the end, following actions and resolution. Action that ended the problem, resolution, the consequences of that action. Here we write them and how we solve it. And here there are 2 elements that will help your writing. Here you write down the setting, the time and the place of this narration. When did it and where did it take place? And the characters, you make sure you write their names here. This chart, when you fulfill it in the pre-writing, it will help you a lot in writing your piece. All right, after that we go to drafting. In drafting, there is the organization of a non-fiction narrative, first beginning, middle, and end. It's exactly what we were doing in the pre-writing, but here you put it into words. You just start clearly defining the focus in order to grab your reader and add details about the writer. When you move to the body, make sure you plot line with the conflict. You mentioned importance of reasons for actions. Also, in order to develop the plots, write specific details about characters, movements, expressions, and gestures, and then you conclude it. You wrap it up by finding the resolution or stating the resolution of the problem and the consequences of those actions. So in this step, you actually do write your first draft. Number 3, revising. I finished my first draft. Should I submit it to my teacher? No, definitely not. Then the revising. Usually after drafting, just go take a walk, take a break, then come back. Then look at your piece of paper, piece of writing. So we have to keep this in mind. I have to make this draft better. How? Now you've finished your first draft. You see, we call it only a first draft. You are ready to revise, make changes to improve your draft by adding, removing, replacing, reordering. Prepare your final draft after thinking how well questions of purpose, audience, genre have been addressed. And then we go to number 4, editing. By editing, we have to make it correct. Okay, revising, making it better, editing, making it correct. I correct my mistakes as you edit. Make sure that you have used consistent verb tense and not shifted to another tense without reason. Make sure you are using the tense that is telling the story properly. For example, you are using the past, stick to the past because the events usually happen in the past, so you stick to the past. All right, don't move to another tense without any reason, especially if it doesn't fit in. So finally, you finished everything. Congratulations. It's the time for publishing. You publish your piece. You get your personal narrative ready for presentation. As I said before, either in the classroom, online, or whatever means. By the way, those steps are not exactly, do not exactly go into all the actual. Do not go in this order in particular. I'm not talking about the last step that is publishing, obviously it's the last one. I'm talking about revising and drafting. They can overlap. You can always go back and revise. You can always go back and edit. All right. And after you finish all of them, you publish. I hope you learned something from the lesson, and this is just an introduction to the writing of personal narrative. Later we work on it in more depth. What I want you to do to write me a brief summary of the 5 steps that I talked about of writing right now. Just summarize this lesson and send it to me via Teams. If you have any other questions, do not hesitate to contact me via Teams. Have a lovely day and take good care of yourselves. Goodbye.